Welcome to
Game Name Here.
Hopefully you've already had a chance to enjoy the offbeat perspective and new game mechanic of Portal. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your use key. To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the use key again. Some commentary nodes may take control of the game in order to show something to you. In these cases, simply press your use key again to stop the commentary. Please let me know what you think after you've had a chance to play, as we think we are just at the beginning of taking advantage of this type of gameplay. I can be reached at gaben@valvesoftware.com. Thanks, and have fun.
Hallo und noch einmal willkommen im computergesteuerten Enrichment Center von Aperture. Wir hoffen, Ihr kurzer Aufenthalt in der Entspannungskammer war angenehm. Ihre Probe wurde verarbeitet und wir können mit dem Haupttest beginnen. Vergessen Sie nicht, dass Spaß und Lernen zwar im Vordergrund aller Aktivitäten im Enrichment Center stehen, dass es aber auch Verletzungen geben kann. Zu Ihrer eigenen Sicherheit sollten Sie auf keinen Fall etwas... Por favor, bordón. Vorsicht, das Portal öffnet sich in 3, 2, 1.
One of the things we learned from Narbacular Drop, our student project that became Portal, was that players often thought portals took them into other spaces, or even other dimensions. To help fight that notion, we start players in a visually unique room with memorable objects, so that when they walk through a portal for the first time, they have a clear point of reference which communicates the idea that they're still in the same basic location. For instance, the radio, which is playing an instrumental version of Still Alive, helps as well by providing some audio continuity. It's absolutely critical that players quickly wrap their heads around what a portal is. We noticed early playtesters grasped the concept much more quickly when they caught a glimpse of themselves through a portal. So we deliberately positioned this first portal to ensure that players will invariably see themselves.
Gut gemacht. Bitte begeben Sie sich nach jedem Test in die Kammerschleuse. Achten Sie zunächst jedoch auf das Leuchtpartikelfeld vor dem Ausgang. Dieses Materialauflösungsgitter von Aperture Science vaporisiert alle passierenden, nicht autorisierten Geräte, zum Beispiel den beschwerten Speicherkubus von Aperture Science.
Portal is effectively an extended player training exercise. We spend a huge portion of the game introducing a series of gameplay tools, then layering those tools into increasingly difficult puzzles. This layering starts here, where we train the button and box mechanic, before introducing the more complicated concept of portals.
Bitte stellen Sie den beschwerten Speicherkubus auf den 1500 Megawatt Schwerlast-Superkollisions-Superknopf.
We wanted players to feel safe while standing in a portal, so we never kill them or destroy objects within a portal that's closing. Instead, we either push or teleport objects out of a portal as it closes.
Perfekt. Bitte begeben Sie sich rasch in die Kammerschleuse da im Test kein andauerndes Verweilen am Knopf vorgesehen ist.
We very deliberately introduce and train each gameplay concept in Portal, so that once players reach this spot, we're confident that they know what a portal is and roughly how it works. Early versions of the game let players stumble through the beginning without always understanding what was going on, which really compromised teaching new concepts. The puzzle you just finished was designed so that stumbling around will almost always lead to a dead end. Completing the puzzle requires walking through a minimum of 5 portals in a specific order. This kind of gating, in which a solid understanding of key gameplay concept is required for success, helped standardize the learning curve of the game tremendously.
Sie machen das sehr gut. Beachten Sie, dass der Geschmack von Blut nicht Teil des Testprotokolls ist, sondern ein unerwünschter Nebeneffekt des Materialauflösungsgitters von Aperture Science, das in manchen Fällen Zahnfüllungen, Kronen, Zahnschmelz und Zähne auflöst.
In early versions of this map, playtesters would charge down the stairs without noticing what was creating the portal. We introduced a mandatory pause in the action, what we call a gate, to help ensure that players stop and notice the portal gun making the blue portal. The particle effect and a loud noise help draw their attention.
Sehr gut. Sie verfügen nun über das mobile Portalgerät von Aperture Science. Damit können Sie eigene Portale schaffen. Diese intradimensionalen Tore sind vollkommen sicher, das Gerät allerdings nicht. Berühren Sie nicht sein aktives Ende. Blicken Sie nicht direkt auf das aktive Ende des Geräts. Bringen Sie das Gerät nicht mit Flüssigkeit in Kontakt. Vor allem sollten Sie unter keinen Umständen das Gerät aus Begeben Sie sich in die Kammerschleuse.
This room was designed to make players understand that entrance and exit portals aren't tied to the color of the portal. Playtesters often assumed that orange portals were exit only, so we created this puzzle to force players to enter an orange portal.
When rendering the player's view through a portal, we must render a separate image using a virtual camera which looks out of the opposite portal.
Sehr
To
gut.
obtain a correct
Übrigens,
image
der Tag
and
der
efficient
offenen Tür
rendering
für
performance,
Töchter bietet
we
sich
render.
an, auch sie testen zu lassen.
When rendering the player's view through a portal, we must render a separate image using a virtual camera which looks out of the opposite portal. To obtain a correct image and efficient rendering performance, we render only what is visible to the limited field of view of the opposite portal and exclude objects which lie between the virtual camera and the plane of the opposite portal.
The combination of portal-destroying fields, which we call fizzlers, and the elevators, serve a dual purpose. They provide a clearly identifiable endpoint for each test chamber, while also addressing the more practical problem of how to keep players from portaling across level loads. We eventually integrated the fizzlers into several of our puzzle designs.
Willkommen in Testkammer 4. Sie sind gar nicht schlecht.
For training purposes, there's generally just one correct solution to these early puzzles. The original version of this room didn't have the glass barrier. Playtesters would often stand on the button to open the door and then shoot a blue portal through the opening, bypassing the box entirely. Since this puzzle was meant to illustrate the relationship between boxes and buttons, that solution, while clever, was a failure. So we added the glass barrier to prevent it. Later in the game, however, the puzzles become more open-ended.
Integrating portals with Source Engine's physics system was a complex process that required several iterations to achieve the right balance of performance and correctness. Because portals can be placed virtually anywhere in the game's environment, the physics system had to be modified to allow dynamic changes to its representation of colliding geometry, such as the walls and floor around this box, and any objects which may lie on the opposite side of the portal. Initial implementations of this dynamic collision generation system could take up to 1/2 of 1 second, or 500 milliseconds, to compute the correct collision. This may not sound like a long time in everyday life, but this pause during the portal creation was quite noticeable in the context of a game. Ultimately, we designed a system that creates temporary hybrid physics environments in bubbles around the portals, using less accurate collision than that produced by Source's standard collision generation, but was accurate enough in practice and reduced the time to create dynamic collision representation from 500 milliseconds to just 10 milliseconds, which is an imperceptible pause during portal creation.
Auch das war wieder sehr gut. Als Teil eines festen Testprotokolls wird die nächste Testkammer nicht überwacht. Sie sind dort ganz auf sich gestellt. Viel Glück!
Early versions of Portal featured more detailed, cluttered environments, much like Half-Life 2. We quickly realized that unnecessary objects scattered all over the place distracted players to the point where it actually interfered with the Portal training process. So we simplified the art style to favor clean, focused test chambers. The modular approach we settled on makes it look plausible that the chambers can reform dynamically on these pistons.
Als Teil eines festen Testprotokolls war die vorige Aussage, dass diese Kammer nicht überwacht wird, eine reine Lüge. Sehr gut. Als Teil eines festen Testprotokolls beenden wir die Wahrheitsverzerrung in 3, 2, Sicherheit ist eins der Ziele des Enrichment Centers. Doch die Energiekapsel von Aperture Science, links von der Kammer, kann dauerhafte Schäden wie Vaporisierung hervorrufen. Passen Sie auf.
To make puzzles deeper than just teleporting to the exit, we had to include surfaces that won't hold a portal, which are formally introduced here. We experimented with several surface designs before we settled on this one, whose visual noise and reflectivity make it easy to identify at a distance.
Sicherheit ist eins der Ziele. Unglaublich. Sie, Subjektname hier.